Shima'at on my scales until I get eaten by a crocodile. Shamu, everybody. We're back with the history of the transmission of the Western tradition. Finally, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into the pyramid texts. It's been a little bit. I'm not a fan of Egypt. I don't know what it is. I've heard it been said that Egyptian gods smell like hospitals. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But we're going to talk about, in the first millennium BCE, in the late period, we're going to talk about the pyramid texts. They are the oldest corpus we have of Egyptian spell texts. They're Old Kingdom, 5th to 6th dynasty. We find them inscribed on the walls of the royal pyramid, so they secure the king's passage and transformation after death. The coffin texts are an expanded, democratized set of basically funerary spells, which are from the Middle Kingdom onward. We find those written, as the name implies, on coffins and on papyri for non-royal elites. Many of these spells we find are revisions and expansions on the pyramid material. Later, this all evolves into the Book of the Dead and the funerary papyri of the New Kingdom, but pyramid text, coffin text is our genealogical pit stop here. So what were these spells about? It was about transformation and apotheosis. We've discussed the incorrect view of apotheosis in the left-hand path stuff. But these were apotheosis in such that they were spells that made the deceased into a living spiritual form. Egyptian eschatology, cosmology, whatever you want to call it, separates the spirit into the Akh and the Ba, and it is transforming these that allows them to join the sun, to fly, to cross thresholds. We also see levels of protection, warding against things like snakes, guards, watchers, and demons that would block the path through the netherworld. On top of this, there is our first look, really, at true name technology, where enumerating the divine and secret names change destiny. Knowing a name gives the speaker leverage over the world. This is a very important concept that comes into our Solomonic tradition later. We also see ritual biography, where spells recite a life-death story so the dead can be recognized and allowed through the barriers. We see a lot of magical materia, using amulets, spells written on objects, figurines, painted scenes, things that would affect real-world protection as well as resurrection. We also see the alignment with solar cycle of night to dawn, the sun's boat carrying the stuff over, the celestial ascent, timing these rites to match with the cosmos. So this technology that we see carries forward into the Western Grimoire. How do we get there? How do we get where we are from here? We look at the transformation formula. Transformation formulas. The Egyptian spells, they aim to make the deceased an immortal form. So this idea of enacting a ritual to create a metaphysical change, this reappears and follows through in a lot of our Neoplatonic theurgy, Iamblichus, Dia Mysteriis, Theurgia, all that, as well as going forward into the Renaissance ritual texts that promise spiritual ascension as well as initiation. So we see the kind of theurgical rhetoric begin here, and that will be later expanded on by Iamblichus. We talked a little bit about the true name technology. The Egyptians were very concerned with the use of secret names and epithets, and this becomes a direct ancestor to our later idea of Enochian and angelic names, the use of divine names in the Solomonic tradition, in the Grimoire tradition, in our talismans and the talismanic inscriptions from the Middle East, in the Islamic world, and all of this moving forward into the Western tradition. effectively, this points out that knowing and speaking the right name will affect reality. The next big thing that we see is the apotropaics. While we saw some in Mesopotamia, it hits a lot harder here with the amulets, pentacles, and talismans. The coffin amulet tradition, this evolves directly into our medieval and Renaissance use of writing names on the amulets and in the pentacles. This idea of text on objects that you can carry with you to protect and channel power comes all the way to our modern day talismans. The icon text magic, this is where we start to get the idea of, again, like putting the magical text on amulets, but also ideas of things like poppets. So the Egyptians would engrave these texts on objects, and this pushes forward to like the European idea of inscribing medals and wax effigies, doing these kind of object-contained spells, where we start to see like poppets and sympathetic direct translations, the beginning of our talismans, these kind of things where the spell stays on the thing. A lot of like this will carry forward into like our phylacteries or a Boros phylactery and things of that nature. We can see a lot of what becomes Christian ritual technology, as well as through that the grimoire procedures, with rituals such as the opening of the mouth and the funerary liturgy, kind of hit the backbone of like the Christian idea of blessing, exorcism, relic veneration. This pulls forward into the grimoires, where these kind of things are also done. This pulls forward into later traditions where we bless and open up statues where the divine live, and that's why we keep statues with us. Of course, the Egyptians were humongous on their solar cycles. So, like, the idea of the sun and the boat and the underworld and the soul and doing these proper cosmic timings for these rituals is directly parallel to what we get in later doctrine of like our magical hours, our planetary correspondences, our electionary astrology. Shout out my boy Ptolemy and the Tetrabiblios. This is where that begins. We also see, finally, this kind of barrier narrative in that we see spells that can be used to neutralize guardians. At thresholds, you can say the right formula at the proper gate, and this will enact a change. We see this very heavy show up in the PGM. We see it very heavy show up in a lot of our antique handbooks of passcodes for spiritual realms. And so we see a lot of these things that the Egyptians used to deal with the dead, essentially Egyptian necromancy, move forward to the backbone of what's going to become the Demotic Magical Papyri, the Ostraca. Next, we're going to be looking at those in the PGM. We're going to be looking at the Technical Hermetica, where the cosmology and the alchemical tech comes in and sets this framework, and that's going to bring us to Neoplatonism, which brings us to the Chaldean oracles, and all of this is going to backbone and ride off of this form of Egyptian necromancy. That's it for me. I hope y'all enjoyed part 2 that we finally got to. May your ancestors bring you the sweetest of portents. May you have the most wonderful dreams. My jaw is doing a lot better, by the way. Shamu.